Hello there, it's Robin May, the founder of the I Believe in Marriage Network, and I'm excited to welcome you to part 4 of our 4-part series, Fix Your Foundation, the often overlooked or underestimated building blocks for marriage. In this series, I've been sharing with you some key principles to really help you shore up your foundation. I shared with you last week that happiness doesn't just happen, and I think we sometimes function under that false assumption without even realizing it. You know what? You love me, I love you, we should be able to make this happen. But if you've been married longer than 6 months, you know that love is important, but love is not enough. There's some other critical components that you need, and that's what we've been talking about in this series. I want to make sure that your foundation is sure so that when the wind blows, and you know the wind is going to blow, life is going to happen. I want to make sure that when the wind blows, that everything you've built doesn't come crashing down. I don't care if you've been married a year or 35 years. You got to make sure you're constantly checking your foundation. My husband and I have to grade ourselves on this. How are we doing in this area? Have we neglected this area? And I want you and your spouse to do the same. Speaking of that, I created a guide to make sure that you could have something to kind of guide you along. You can grab that guide by going to ibelieveinmarriage.com/Jenga. You see what I did there? We're using Jenga as a visual because if you've ever played, you know if you keep messing with the foundation, the tower falls. So go to ibelieveinmarriage.com/Jenga. If you've missed the previous videos, don't you even worry about it. They're all on Facebook, they're on Instagram, and if you get the guide, it gives you a couple of more places that you can find the previous videos. Now, I promise to keep these videos at 10 minutes or less. I have my notes here to make sure that I don't go off track, and so I'm ready to dive into our last 2 principles, but first, I want to share with you the first 6 principles that we've covered, all right? Number 1, we've talked about the importance of an anchor. Make sure you watch video number 1 so you can understand that. Number 2, we dived into emotional intelligence, critical. Number 3, we talked about the importance of clear expectation. 4, we talked about accountability. 5, we talked about the power. There is power in humility. And then building block number 6, we talked about avoiding unintentional neglect. All right, you ready for principle or building block number 7? This is the capacity to expand your perspective. If you've been rocking with the I Believe in Marriage Network over the last 6 months, you've seen me really address this because this is so important. Now, if you go into the gym and you start lifting weights, and if you've never really lifted weights before, you can't go in there and I can't go in there and just start pumping 200 pounds. I have to build the capacity to handle that much weight. If you've been walking for a while and you're ready to start running, you have to build the capacity to be able to run. It's the same thing with this principle. You have to learn to expand your perspective, but you got to build the capacity to do that. This is connected to emotional intelligence, but it's taking another turn from it. For a long time, I talked about the importance of self-awareness in marriage, and that is very important. You got to know your stuff. You can't say everything is your spouse's issue, but knowing your stuff is just one part of it. Not only do you need to know your stuff, you got to be willing to do something about it. You got to be willing to say, you know what, if this is impacting my marriage, I'm willing to adjust. Well, y'all, it's the same thing when it comes to expanding your perspective. It's one thing to know you're strong-willed. It's another thing to know that you're stubborn. It's one thing to know that you can be stuck in your way, but it's a whole nother situation to refuse to do anything about it. So when I talk about perspective and expanding your perspective, what I mean is, while you might see it this way, you have this point of view, you are open to and willing to genuinely understand how your spouse is seeing it. It's almost like you want to switch places with your spouse so that you can see it through their lens. That's having the capacity to expand your perspective. Y'all, this doesn't even mean that you necessarily agree with your spouse. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you change how you view it, but you are open to and willing and want to fully understand where your spouse is coming from. So let me tell you what others may not want to tell you. Now, y'all, this is a little tough love, but know it's coming from a loving place, because ultimately I want you and your spouse to be rocking in your rocking chairs at Cracker Barrel when you are 75 years old. So I'm going to tell you what somebody might not have told you. If you are unable to expand your point of view, if you have tunnel vision, if you can only see things the way you see them, you are not easy to deal with. I know I told you it was hard, but you are not easy to work with. You're not easy to hang out with, and you are surely not easy to live with. If you are only able to see it your way, y'all, it makes it very, very hard to function with someone with that mindset. But I have good news, y'all. It is fixable. This doesn't have to be that way all the time. But you have to start with acknowledgement. You got to acknowledge, you know what, sometimes I can be hard-headed. Sometimes I can be very stubborn or stuck in my ways. You got to acknowledge it. But remember, I said you don't just acknowledge it. You got to do something about it. Well, you have to start practicing curiosity. I'm very curious. I want to know. I want to understand where you are coming from. The next thing you can do is learn to be reasonable, y'all. That's another important key, to be reasonable, be fair. Stop judging your spouse. Really seek to understand. One of the things you can do is just practice role reversal. How would you feel if your spouse refused to see your perspective? If you felt really passionate about this and your spouse was shutting you down and telling you were wrong? Another way it can help you is if you think about if you had a boss and you're trying to explain to your boss what's going on and your boss refuses to listen to your perspective. Think about the frustration that would occur with that. That's what happens when we don't have the capacity to expand our perspective. I don't have a lot of time, so let's keep going. Building block number 8, y'all, this is super important. Creating and nurturing a safe space in your marriage. Y'all, we have to have a safe space in our marriage. So what is that? It is a marriage culture that encourages the freedom to share vulnerably without fear of rejection. You want to create a culture in your marriage where the two of you can share freely and vulnerably without fear of rejection. I want you to consider, what is the culture of your marriage? I was working with a couple recently, and we realized that the culture of their marriage was rooted in dishonesty. What is the culture of your marriage? Now, when we talk about a safe space, it doesn't mean that it's consequence-free. I don't even like that word, but it doesn't mean that it's consequence-free. It doesn't mean that your spouse is rigid. You share something very damaging or damning or something difficult to comprehend, and your spouse you can't expect your spouse just to say, okay, I understand that. Y'all, this is not rigid. We're not being rigid, but it does encourage the protection of one another's heart. You're very careful about how you respond, what you say, how you engage, okay? And so what is that made of? What is a safe space made of? It's made of trust, where I can trust you. And that's more than just fidelity. Fidelity is a part of that, but it's more than just fidelity. I can trust you with my heart. I can trust that you're not dogging me to your family. I can trust that you're not dogging me to your best friend. So it's trust, respect. What does respect look like to your spouse? What does it look like to you? And then number 3, personal responsibility. You're willing to take responsibility for your part in the chaos. So what is a safe space made of? Trust, respect, and personal responsibility. And y'all, a safe space has to be created. A safe space has to be cultivated, and a safe space has to be covered. Those C's got me messed up. It has to be created. You got to intentionally create a safe space. This is how we do this in our marriage. Number 2, you got to cultivate it. Keep working at it. And then number 3, you got to cover it. You don't let anything come against that safe space. All right, y'all, cannot believe we are done with our 4-part series. I have been super excited about sharing this with you. I'd love to hear back from you, and make sure you tell your family and friends to join the series. They can start from the very top. They just go to ibelieveinmarriage.com/Jenga, and they'll get all the videos just like you did. Remember, a happy foundation or a healthy foundation is necessary if you want to have a happy forever. It doesn't just happen. You got to make it happen. All right. I cannot wait to connect with you guys again soon.